The racist cop thought he was blackmailing a scared judge. He laid out his threats, confident he had won. He never saw the black SUVs surrounding the parking lot until it was too late. The air in Federal Courtroom 3B was heavy with the scent of old wood and procedural boredom. For Judge Monica Blake, it was just another Tuesday. At 38, she was one of the youngest federal judges ever appointed in the state, a distinction she had earned through a brilliant career as a prosecutor and an unassailable reputation for fairness. Her courtroom was a place of order, a system of logic she commanded with quiet, unshakable authority. Today, however, that order was being challenged by the sloppiness of Officer Greg Stanton. Stanton was a relic, a man whose brutish approach to policing belonged to a bygone era. He stood at the prosecution's table, a smug look on his face, as the case against a young Latino man accused of loitering fell apart under Monica's calm, methodical questioning. "Officer Stanton," Judge Blake said, her voice even but carrying an edge of steel. "The body camera footage you submitted shows the defendant, Mr. Garcia, simply waiting for a bus. At what point did his waiting become criminal loitering?" "He was acting suspiciously, Your Honor," Stanton grunted, his disrespect for her authority barely concealed. "He looked nervous when my cruiser passed." "Nervousness is not a crime, officer. And your report fails to mention that the bus stop he was waiting at has been out of service for 6 months due to construction. It does, however, mention that you ran his name for priors before initiating contact. This court finds no probable cause for the stop, let alone the arrest. Case dismissed." A flash of raw fury crossed Stanton's face. He wasn't just a cop, he was a gatekeeper of what he considered his town, and he hated seeing his judgment questioned, especially by her. Monica Blake, with her sharp mind, her Ivy League degree, and her unapologetic blackness, was everything he resented in a world he no longer understood. Later that day, as Monica walked through the courthouse hallway, her mind already on the next brief, Stanton stepped out from an alcove, blocking her path. "Judge," he said, the word dripping with sarcasm. Monica stopped, her expression impassive. "Officer. That was a bad call you made in there," he said, his voice a low growl. "You're letting criminals walk." "I'm upholding the Constitution, officer. I suggest you reread it sometime." He took a step closer, invading her space. "You think that black robe makes you untouchable? You're just like the rest of them. You get a little power, and you forget where you came from." The threat was unmistakable, personal and venomous. For a fleeting moment, Monica was transported back 15 years. She was a rookie prosecutor, fresh out of law school, facing down the leader of a violent gang in a holding cell. He'd been bigger than Stanton, his threats more graphic, promising what his crew would do to her if she didn't drop the charges. She remembered the fear she felt then, a cold knot in her stomach. But she also remembered what she did. She had looked him dead in the eye and said, "The only place you're going is a supermax prison. And I'm the one sending you there." She had broken him not with threats, but with the cold, hard certainty of the law. She looked at Stanton now and saw not a fearsome monster, but a pathetic, angry little man, his power derived entirely from the badge and gun he wore. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound, weary contempt. "Watch yourself, Stanton," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You're in my house now. And in my house, the rules matter." She stepped around him and walked away, not realizing that for a man like Stanton, being dismissed was more infuriating than being challenged. She had just lit a fuse. The warning came 2 weeks later. It was 7:42 on a crisp Monday morning. Monica left her apartment building, her mind already cycling through the day's docket, when she stopped cold at the curb. Her car, a modest but well-kept sedan, was a mangled wreck. The driver's side window was a spiderweb of shattered glass. The other 3 had been smashed in completely. Both front tires were slashed, the rubber sagging sadly onto the pavement. The hood was bashed in, the metal crumpled as if someone had taken a crowbar to it with a hateful, rhythmic violence. It was a violation. A raw, personal attack designed to terrorize. And tucked neatly under the one remaining windshield wiper, fluttering in the morning breeze, was a note. Her hands were steady as she picked it up. The words were scrawled in a thick, angry black marker. "Stay quiet. Or next time it's not just the car." She stood there for a long moment, the note in her hand, the wreckage of her car before her. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. The fear that the attacker had intended to inspire was absent. In its place was a cold, clarifying rage. The initial shock quickly receded, and her analytical mind took over, processing the scene not as a victim, but as a prosecutor building a case. This wasn't a random act of vandalism. The location, the timing, the targeted destruction, it was a message. It was a continuation of the threat Officer Stanton had made in the courthouse hallway. He had escalated from verbal intimidation to property destruction. She knew, with absolute certainty, what his next step would be. After property came person. Her first instinct, the instinct of any law-abiding citizen, was to call the police. But she immediately dismissed the thought. Call who? The local precinct? The very department Stanton worked for? She could already picture the process. A board officer would take a report. The investigation would go nowhere. Her complaint would be dismissed as a coincidence, attributed to random city crime. They would protect their own. Calling the police would be worse than doing nothing. It would be an act of willful naivety, a surrender to the very system she was supposed to command. No. She could not trust the local authorities to police themselves. She turned around, leaving the shattered car where it sat, and walked back into her apartment building. The note was still clutched in her hand. Her mind was a whirlwind of legal statutes, risk assessments, and strategic options. Stanton had made a critical error. He had assumed he was attacking a scared woman. He had no idea he had just declared war on a federal judge. And a federal judge, she thought with a grim sense of irony, had access to a different set of tools. She sat down in her quiet, sunlit living room and pulled out her phone. She scrolled past the numbers for the local police chief and the State Bureau of Investigation. They were compromised, part of the same fraternity that produced men like Stanton. She needed to go outside the system to clean it up. She needed someone she could trust implicitly, someone with power, reach, and a shared contempt for dirty cops. She found the name in her contacts and pressed call. He answered on the second ring. "Monica," the voice said, warm and professional. "It's early. Don't tell me you're calling to cancel poker night." "I wish, David," Monica replied, her voice steady. "Listen, I have a situation. A serious one. And I need the Department of Justice." There was a pause on the other end, and then the voice of David Knox, her best friend since law school and now a high-ranking deputy in the DOJ's Public Integrity Section, became all business. "Tell me everything," he said. And as she detailed the threat, the car, and the note, Monica Blake knew she had just initiated her own counteroffensive. The trap was about to be set. David Knox arrived at Monica's apartment 3 hours later. He wasn't just a friend, he was a surgical instrument of the federal government, a man who had spent his career dissecting corrupt systems. After inspecting the mangled car and the threatening note, which he handled with evidence-grade gloves, he sat across from Monica at her dining room table. "He's sloppy," David said, his voice a quiet murmur of professional assessment. "This is all passion, no planning. That makes him predictable. And dangerous. He thinks he's untouchable," Monica added. "He's been protected by his department for years. He believes he's above the law because, in his world, he has been. People who believe they're above the law often have the most to hide," David mused, steepling his fingers. "So, we don't react to his threat. We create a new board, with our own rules. We need to lure him into a controlled environment where his own arrogance will be the weapon that destroys him." For the next 2 hours, the federal judge and the DOJ deputy director designed a sting operation with the meticulous detail of a military campaign. Their conversation was a rapid-fire exchange of legal theory, psychological profiling, and tactical planning. His next move will be blackmail, Monica predicted. He's already tried intimidation. It didn't work. He'll look for leverage, something personal he can use to force me to back down or recuse myself from cases involving his buddies. Agreed, David said, pulling out a laptop. So we need to know what he's looking for. I'll have a team do a deep dive background check on you, a friendly one. We need to find any potential vulnerability he might discover, so we can prepare for it. My brother, Marcus, Monica said instantly. He had a sealed juvenile record. A stupid mistake involving a joyride when he was 19. It was expunged, but a cop with the right connections could probably find a whisper of it. Perfect, David said, a grim smile on his face. That's our bait. It's personal, it's embarrassing, and it's just plausible enough for him to think he's got a winning hand. They mapped out the entire operation on a whiteboard. Phase 1 was surveillance. David would authorize a team from the DOJ's Technical Operations Unit to sweep Monica's apartment, her chambers, and her car, once repaired, for bugs. They would then install their own. We'll put a ghost in the machine, David explained. A keylogger on her courthouse computer, a passive audio recorder in her office. Everything he does, every search he runs on the police database trying to dig up dirt on you, we'll see it. It'll give us a clear picture of his intent. Phase 2 was communication. You can't use your own phone anymore, David instructed. He handed her a sleek, black burner phone. This is a clean device. Encrypted. The only number in it is mine. When he makes his next move, you'll respond with this. We need to control the entire channel. Phase 3 was the trap itself. He'll want to meet, Monica said. He'll want to see the fear in my eyes when he delivers the blackmail threat. That's his payoff. And that's where we get him, David confirmed. We need a location. Public enough to be plausible for a meeting, but isolated enough for us to maintain full control. No back exits, clear lines of sight. They spent an hour on Google Maps, analyzing parking lots, parks, and industrial areas before settling on the perfect spot, the top level of a quiet, city-owned parking garage behind an old hardware store, a place that would be deserted after 6 p.m. My team will be in place hours before, David said, sketching the layout. A surveillance van 2 blocks away with a direct audio feed. 2 agent vehicles on the level below. He'll be in a federal box and he won't even know it until the lid closes. They role-played the conversation, crafting Monica's responses to be the perfect blend of fear, desperation, and a willingness to negotiate. She had to seem like a victim, a scared woman ready to make a deal to protect her family. It was a role she despised, but she knew it was necessary. She had to play the part of the prey to lure the predator into the cage. By the end of the meeting, the plan was flawless. It was a web of legal procedure, psychological manipulation, and technological superiority. Officer Greg Stanton thought he was hunting a judge. In reality, he was now the primary target of a full-blown federal sting operation, and the hunters were coming for him. Just as Monica had predicted, Stanton's next move was blackmail. The Friday of that same week, a plain manila envelope was slipped under the door of her judicial chambers. There was no name on it. Inside, a single sheet of paper contained a cheap photocopy of a decades-old arrest report. The name on it was Marcus Blake. The charge was grand theft auto. Monica's blood ran cold, not with fear, but with a surge of protective fury for her younger brother. Marcus had been a good kid who fell in with a bad crowd for one summer. The grand theft was taking his friend's father's car for an unauthorized joyride across state lines. The charges had been dropped, the record sealed and expunged. It was a youthful mistake, long buried. For Stanton to dig up this painful memory and try to weaponize it against her was a profound violation. On the bottom of the page, the same thick, black marker from the first note had scrawled a new message. Dismissed the Simmons case. And any other case involving my brothers in blue. Or this gets leaked to the press. Your judge days are over. The Simmons case was another one of Stanton's, a clear-cut instance of evidence tampering she was scheduled to review. He wasn't just trying to save himself, he was trying to corrupt her entire bench. Now that she had the bait, it was time to set the hook. Following the plan she and David had meticulously designed, she feigned a panic she did not feel. She made a series of frantic-sounding, and DOJ-monitored, calls to a trusted court clerk, asking hypothetical questions about judicial ethics and recusals. She knew Stanton would have ears in the courthouse, and she needed the performance to be convincing. Meanwhile, from his own small, untidy apartment, Officer Greg Stanton was feeling the intoxicating rush of victory. He had obtained the Blake kid's record through a shady contact at the County Juvenile Records Office, a favor called in over a bottle of cheap whiskey. He saw himself as a righteous crusader, a thin blue line protecting his own from the liberal, black-coddling agenda of a judge like Monica Blake. He saw her not as a person, but as a symbol of a changing world he hated. Her power was, to him, an unnatural aberration. His phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. This is Judge Blake. Do not contact me at my chambers again. Who is this? What do you want? Stanton smiled. The fear in the text was palpable. She was hooked. He typed back, his thumbs greasy from a bag of chips. You know what I want. You do as I say, and your brother's dirty laundry stays private. You don't, and every reporter in the state gets a copy. Monica, sitting in her living room with David Knox listening on a secure line, crafted her reply. I can't talk about this over text. This could destroy me. Can we meet? Please. Just to talk. Stanton's grin widened. She was begging. This was better than he could have imagined. He felt powerful, in control. He was the one pulling the strings now, not the high and mighty federal judge. My terms, he typed back. Parking lot behind the old True Value hardware store. Tonight. 9 p.m. Come alone. No cops, no lawyers. Or the deal is off, and your career is over. He hit send and leaned back in his chair, basking in the glow of his own perceived brilliance. He imagined her arriving, scared and alone, ready to bow to his demands. He pictured himself holding this power over her for years to come, a secret weapon to ensure she never crossed him or his brothers again. He was so blinded by his own arrogance and hatred that he never once considered the most fundamental rule of any conflict: know your enemy. He had no idea that he wasn't dictating terms. He was walking into a meticulously designed kill box. The top level of the parking garage was a desolate, windswept place, lit by the sickly orange glow of a few buzzing sodium lamps. It smelled of old concrete and urban decay. At 8:45 p.m., Judge Monica Blake pulled her rented sedan into a designated spot, the city lights twinkling below like a distant, unconcerned galaxy. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her heart rate was a calm, rhythmic 72 beats per minute. Outwardly, she was the picture of a terrified woman walking into a trap. Inwardly, the Marine in her was performing a final systems check. She was wired for audio and video. A pinhole camera, disguised as a lapel pin on her coat, was transmitting a live, high-definition feed. The burner phone she was to use for a proof of life call to David was also a live microphone. She knew that 2 floors below, a team of 4 DOJ agents sat in a black Suburban, monitoring her vitals and listening to her every word. In a panel van 2 blocks away, David Knox commanded the operation, watching multiple video feeds on a bank of monitors. Stanton thought he was the predator. He had no idea he was the specimen under the microscope. At precisely 9 p.m., a pair of headlights swept across the garage. Stanton's beat-up personal vehicle pulled in and parked 20 feet away. He got out, a silhouette against the city glow. He wore plain clothes, jeans and a dark jacket, but he couldn't disguise the arrogant swagger in his walk. He sauntered over to her car, peering in the window. Monica took a deep, calming breath, then opened the door and stepped out, playing her role. She clutched her coat tightly, her shoulders hunched slightly, her face a carefully constructed mask of fear and anxiety. "You came alone?" he grunted, his eyes scanning the empty garage. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling just enough. "Please, just, what do you want from me?" "I want you to know your place," he said, stepping closer, enjoying her feigned terror. He leaned against her car, invading her space, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial growl. "You federal types, you come into our town, you sit on your high horse, and you think you can tell us how to do our jobs. You don't know how the real world works." "The Simmons case," Monica began. "If I dismiss it, will this go away?" "Oh, it's not just about the Simmons case anymore," he sneered, his confidence swelling. "This is a new arrangement. From now on, any case involving one of my officers, you run it by me first. You get my approval. You make the call I tell you to make. You are going to be my own personal judge on the inside. And if you don't, this little report about your jailbird brother," he tapped a manila envelope he was holding, "finds its way onto the desk of every journalist and every political rival you have. Your career will be over. You'll be lucky to be a traffic court judge in a hick town by the time I'm done with you." It was all there. A direct threat. A clear case for blackmail and tampering with a federal officer. He had just handed them his entire career on a silver platter. Monica allowed a single tear to trace a path down her cheek. "You can't do this," she pleaded, delivering her final line. "You'll destroy my family." Stanton laughed, a cruel, triumphant sound that echoed in the empty garage. "I already have," he said. "You just don't know it yet. Now, do we have a deal?" It was the trigger phrase. In David Knox's ear, Monica's voice was the signal. "Execute," David said calmly into his microphone. The world erupted. From the ramp at the far end of the garage, a black SUV with no lights on roared up onto the level, its tires squealing. Simultaneously, another identical SUV appeared from the opposite ramp, their headlights flicking on at the same instant, pinning Stanton in a blinding crossbeam of light. Doors flew open, and 6 figures in dark tactical gear, DOJ stenciled in white letters across their backs, swarmed out, weapons drawn. "Federal agents. Hands where I can see them," a voice boomed, amplified and authoritative. Stanton froze, his smug expression melting into pure, unadulterated shock. His mind couldn't process the sudden, overwhelming shift in reality. One moment he was the master of the universe, the next he was the star of his own takedown video. He instinctively reached toward his back, where his off-duty weapon was holstered. "Don't even think about it," another agent shouted. Before he could make another move, 2 agents were on him, spinning him around and slamming him against the hood of Monica's car with brutal efficiency. His face hit the metal with a sickening thud. His arms were wrenched behind his back, and the cold, unforgiving click of federal-grade handcuffs echoed in the night. David Knox stepped out of the lead vehicle, his suit immaculate, his expression grim. He walked over to a stunned Stanton, who was now being read his Miranda rights. "Greg Stanton," David said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Stanton, his face pressed against the car, twisted his head to look at Monica. She was no longer hunched or crying. She stood tall, her arms crossed, her expression as cold and hard as the concrete beneath their feet. The fear was gone, replaced by the dispassionate gaze of a judge who had just passed sentence. You set me up," Stanton gasped, the realization finally dawning on him. Monica took a slow step forward, her eyes locking with his. "You set yourself up, officer," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You did it the day you decided that your badge gave you the right to threaten a federal officer of the court. You just weren't smart enough to know who you were threatening." The trial of Greg Stanton was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming, a digital mountain of his own arrogance. There were the text messages, the audio recording from Monica's wire, the crystal clear video from the DOJ surveillance van capturing his every word, his every threat. His own police department, facing a massive federal lawsuit and public scandal, disavowed him completely. His brothers in blue were nowhere to be seen. 2 months later, Judge Monica Blake took the stand, not as a judge in her own robes, but as the primary witness against him. The courtroom was packed. Cameras rolled. Reporters scribbled furiously. Greg Stanton sat at the defendant's table in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, his head bowed, a broken man. Monica recounted the events with the same calm, factual precision she brought to her own bench. She laid out the initial threat, the vandalism, the blackmail, and the final confrontation in the parking garage. She did not raise her voice. She did not editorialize. She simply presented the truth, and her testimony was devastating. When the prosecutor asked her what she felt when Stanton threatened her and her family, Monica paused for a long moment. "As a sister and a daughter, I felt anger," she said, her voice steady. "But as a judge, I felt a profound sadness. Because Officer Stanton's actions were not just an attack on me. They were an attack on the very idea of justice we are all sworn to uphold. He used the color of his authority to threaten, to intimidate, and to corrupt. And that is a betrayal that cannot be tolerated in a free society." The verdict was swift. Guilty on all counts, tampering with a federal officer, criminal destruction of property, blackmail, and making terroristic threats. The sentencing was 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern, older black man whom Stanton had once mocked in the courthouse cafeteria, looked down at him from the bench. "Mr. Stanton," he said, his voice like gravel. "You took an oath to protect and serve. You used that oath as a weapon to serve your own hatred and ego. You are a disgrace to the uniform. I sentence you to the maximum penalty allowed by law, 20 years in a federal penitentiary, with no possibility of parole." A gasp went through the courtroom. Stanton sagged in his chair as if his strings had been cut. As the bailiffs led him away, he looked back one last time at Monica. She stood tall, her arms folded, her expression calm and unreadable. Later that day, Monica called her brother Marcus. "It's over," she said simply. "I saw it on the news," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do that for me, Moni." "I didn't do it for you, Marcus," she said, a small smile in her voice. "I did it for us. Now, no one can ever use that against you again." She had taken his secret, the weapon he tried to use against her, and rendered it powerless by dragging it into the light. Justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about freeing the innocent. If you believe that the law should protect everyone, regardless of their status or the color of their skin, like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories of justice, and share this story. Let us know in the comments what you think is the most important quality in a judge.